Welcome to today's episode for people interested in the extraordinary, yet ancient and often long forgotten stuff. This is your host, Joseph Schinwald from homebythebeach.com. And our guest today is Meagan O'Nan. Hello, Meagan.
Hi.
Meagan O'Nan, an award-winning author, keynote speaker, and vulnerable storytelling expert. She is the author of the award-winning book, Creating Your Heaven on Earth, and another book, Courage, Agreeing to Disagree is Not Enough. Moreover, she has shared the stage with inspirational speakers such as Don Miguel Ruiz, author of the best-selling book, The Four Agreements. And Meagan has appeared multiple times in local and national media. Most fascinating, she has received the personal praise from Desmond Tutu for her splendid work for God and God's children. Our topic today is Meagan's specialty, the power of vulnerable storytelling. And we will talk a little bit about her new book. So, Meagan, can you tell us a little bit why it is so important to tell your story, your life story, and to be able to tell it? Because we know that it's just not good for our own spirituality and our own psyche if we don't. And what does it mean to have a vulnerable storytelling?
Yeah, great question. I was actually on a podcast yesterday and we got into this conversation as well. And we were talking about, the power of our stories and how it's important to tell them for our own inner freedom. And my life has shown me the power of storytelling by accident. It wasn't something that, this path, this expertise, this career has kind of unfolded for me. It wasn't something I was necessarily looking for, but it was just the path I took for my own healing. I am a gay woman. I live in the South in Mississippi in the United States. And I had a really hard coming out experience. I was rejected by my spiritual community. I had a really hard time with my family and my parents and my siblings. And so it was just a really challenging time for me. And it really forced me to leave home and go and find myself and have some sort of healing, to find some sort of worthiness. And I ended up coming back to Mississippi in 2010. And I thought I was coming here to really help. And I learned very quickly that I was here to heal and that I was going to have to face some really hard things to be comfortable in my own skin. And what the path that opened up for me was being asked to stand in my truth as a gay person and be open about who I am. And I was asked to be in the news, the media, be on television, speak on stages and tell my story and to share my experiences with other people. And I always approached all of these interactions from a place of vulnerability, meaning that I shared what was truly on my heart. I shared my hurt. I shared my pain. I shared my joys. I shared everything that was true for me. And I avoided blaming other people for either rejecting me or discriminating against me or whatever the issue was. I really focused on my experience to communicate with others. And over time, I found two things. One was that sharing my stories in that way was healing for me. And sharing my stories in that way is what allowed me to have conversations with people that I normally wouldn't have conversations with, people who were really different from me, who wanted to learn from me and who I wanted to learn from. And so I just found that the power of vulnerable storytelling was something that was a connection to myself and a connection to others in a way that was really meaningful. And so it just became this path for me that I've been really digging into in the last 4 or 5 years in my career and teaching other people how to share their own stories in the same way so that they can have a similar experience. But to me, storytelling is really an opportunity and a path towards inner freedom. It's a big aspect of getting to a place where you feel whole.
Yes, but you have created a method of powerfully telling your story. Mm-hmm. And could you share a little bit more about that method?
Yeah. And so I typically work with, in my coaching, I typically work with speakers, keynote speakers, professional speakers, thought leaders, and I teach them this method for speaking purposes, because I have found, obviously in my own life, that speaking on stage or speaking in the media or podcast or whatever it is, that it's just a really healing form of communication for someone who's already in the public eye. And so the method is very similar to any other storytelling theory. I just added a vulnerability and authenticity piece. So typically what you do is you start with the context. When you begin telling a story, you start with the context, the characters, and the conflict. And once you go into the story, you really want people to feel like they're in your shoes. You want them to experience what it's like to be where you are in that time. And the next piece is vulnerability, authenticity. What are you feeling within that conflict? What's going on for you that's hard? Are you feeling confused? Are you feeling afraid? Are you feeling unworthy? These are things that it's kind of like the same method that you would take in life when you're faced with a challenge, right? It's no different when you're telling a story. The next phase after the vulnerability, authenticity piece is transformation. And that's the point where we have clarity, where something happens and we experience, we see a way through that challenge. Maybe someone says something to us and it clicks and it changes everything and how we want to move forward. And I think it's true in life too, when we're able to be vulnerable and authentic with ourselves and acknowledge what we're experiencing and we accept it, then we often, the clouds part and we're often able to see beyond. And after the transformation phase is a phase that is sometimes called resolution. And I don't remember what I have on my website. I know I had another word for it, but basically it's seeing the lessons that you've learned from that experience and sharing it. And then the next step is onward. And that onward phase is about, what's next? How have my beliefs changed? How are my perceptions changed? How am I going to see things differently now that I've gone through this challenge? And so the method isn't just about telling a really good story. It's also about getting through life. And it's just a really great context. Actually, if you go to my website, I put an entire video up explaining this method and great detail. I think it's like 10 minutes long. And so I'm giving that to people for free because, it's just a very useful tool. And no matter if you're wanting to tell a story on stage or if you're wanting to share your story with a counselor or in your journal, or you're just interested in storytelling in general, it's a great way to view life as well.
Your website is your name plus .com. Meagan O'Nan.
MeaganO'Nan.com.
.com. And it will be in the show notes, but it's easy to remember. A great website. I've been studying it. I personally, Meagan, I know for myself the power of storytelling. I don't know much about the vulnerability thing, but in business, when you have a brand story, like I'm a solopreneur, and in business, you have to have a story. Like even on your website about my story, whatever, right? So by what I learned from other marketers, and I would like to exchange that with you, what I maybe can, what I maybe do wrong, or what I need to still learn about it. Then we finish this topic up and we go to the book, your new book. For me, it was a big revelation when I started reading a book 15 years ago. It was about being always honest to yourself, brutally honest. Right. When I started doing it, I felt liberated, but I was also becoming very, I got a humor that makes people just laugh and laugh and laugh, because I'm just shoot it out and it's the truth. I don't care. But recently I learned also in business, for instance, when I have this podcast agency and, I'm the owner and I have to present myself why I'm interested in this. What is my story about it? Right? I've been 50 times on interviewed myself. I know about positioning, so I can tell a story why I know about positioning. I was a university professor, all this stuff, right?
Right.
And so that makes me love and have passion for what I'm doing as a story. Mm-hmm. When I tell a story, let's say when you sit together with really nice people and you have dinner, and it's very interesting when people talk deeply about who they are. And there I learned how to leave things out without lying, and
Right.
and then just boast a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. It could be laughable a little bit. You can actually say it wasn't 10 I was posting, it was 8 or something, but I tried to make my story that way. But ultimately I've also learned over the time now to talk about things which were vulnerable for me. Certain trauma, several, everybody has it. To just suddenly, when you talk about it, and you can talk, notice by yourself when you talk about it, and you can say it in a way, it's not funny, but people can see you are over it. You're not presenting it as your problem. You just, this happened to you, you just say it out. And it was shameful before, but now it's not shameful anymore because I'm over it and it happened to me. That's true. It's the truth, right? So what do you think about me? Am I normal to do this, what I'm doing?
I mean, I think, yes, absolutely. I think it's hard to be vulnerable. And I think we all are challenged with that because we've all been hurt before when we've been vulnerable. And so, for me, it's a process. And I think in order to love myself in my own story, in my own journey, being vulnerable was the key for my own healing, because I needed to just put it out on the table and be okay with who I am. And so, I'm very familiar with that feeling of not wanting to be completely authentic and completely vulnerable, because, it is a little bit easier in the moment, but then, I would find that I would suffer later because I wasn't allowing myself to be seen. I wasn't allowing myself to be fully loved by other people because I wasn't giving them my full self. But I think, I actually was having this conversation yesterday with the same podcast host, and I was talking about earlier, and she was talking about the same thing, is like, why do we hold ourselves back? Why do we keep ourselves from being vulnerable? And I think it's just that we are so trained by society, by culture, to not let ourselves be fully loved and not let ourselves be fully seen, because we're so afraid of what may happen in the future, or how people are going to feel about us, or how we're going to be viewed or perceived. And the other side of that is, when you share yourself fully, you accept yourself more, and you care less about other people's perception. And so I think just opening up to the idea that being vulnerable is something that helps you love yourself more, rather than being scared of how other people are going to react to you, seeing it in that way, that it's for you and not for everybody else, I think is kind of the key, because I think most people are scared of other people's reactions, and it's not about that. It's about you standing in your power and finding that inner freedom for yourself.
Yes, but still, I think you have to be like, I know it from my experience. I live in this small village in Mallorca, and it's a lovely community of foreigners, mostly Europeans, British, German, whatever. I have many new friends. It's a small village, but you meet people in the restaurants, you meet them in the square. Right. And I would say, for me, it's also what I learned in this 1 year I'm here now, about my own self and the way I presented myself. It's not a business scenario. It's just like a scenario where you just enjoy life. People like to just be. They don't want to necessarily talk about who they are, right, what they have, or things like this. They do it sometimes, but not usually. Right. And so what I learned is social awareness. For instance, if I'm really aware of who is sitting here, who's sitting next, how is that, what is the context, because I have self-awareness, but also the social awareness is very important. Because before, when I came, I lacked the social awareness often, and it just said things that they were just really not landing right. It was edgy. The whole feeling was edgy. Yeah. And let's say I tell you one fun story. I was 25 years in Latin America, right? So when people come and they say, "Oh, you have been 25 years in Latin America." Yes, I was an international drug dealer. Well, some people laugh about it because it's not true, of course. But when you have been as an Austrian 25 years in Latin America, you can make a joke. I'm an international drug dealer. So for some people that lands very well. They laugh. Yeah. For other people it doesn't. So you have social awareness.
Yeah, completely.
Well, if I talk about like some things that happened to me because I'm separated from my wife 15 years. My 3 children, they live in Canada and in the States. So now people ask me about these things, right? I don't want to lie, but I'm not always telling everything either. So it's like the social awareness part. But you know what? This leads us really right away into your new book. And because it's about your memoirs and it's about wisdom traditions and it's about your spiritual journey. So I would like to know more about it. What made you write the book? For whom is it? And what is it called? I have it in front of me. Please say it.
It's called Held and Free. And it really is everything that we've been talking about. It's I'm so passionate about storytelling and sharing our stories in ways that are effective and meaningful for us. But I needed to tell all of my story, and I wanted to do it in a deep way. And I've always wanted to write a memoir. So it was kind of like a goal of mine, but I'm at the stage in my life where I have a family now, and I just feel very grateful for where I am and whole. And I felt like it was time. I felt like I could write this book from a healed place. And so it's been quite a journey. It's been hard to write some of these stories. And it's definitely the most vulnerable I've ever been in any of my writing. So I actually had to delay my publication because I'm still digging into it. I'm not going to get published until January. Originally, the plan was September, but I just needed more time because there's so much depth to these stories and everything. So anyway, I wanted to write it because I've always wanted to write a memoir. And it's also been a very an even more healing experience for me that I didn't expect. But it's all about being held and free to me means inner freedom. It means getting to a place of wholeness. It's all about feeling completely held by the universe, by God, and also feeling free within myself to be myself in the world, and the journey towards that, and how I lost my way and came back and have really struggled and had a hard time over the years to love myself. And so it's kind of an in-depth look to what inner freedom looks like for me.
Yes. How did wisdom traditions, which you mentioned about the book on the website, that it was influenced by also wisdom traditions, right? So I know that I'm very much influenced by wisdom tradition. Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Probably mostly by the Bible, even though I don't read it anymore, and I wouldn't consider myself a Christian, honestly.
Right.
But the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, I'm still very respectful for it, of course, because I think East and West, they really need each other completely. There's nothing better or worse, it's just together.
Right.
But this extreme makes you aware of the other truth, maybe, right? So it's like, it's particularly when you talk about God, you need to know absolutely, what are you talking about? How do you define God? Because the East has a different cosmology, mythology. The West has a different cosmology, mythology. God means totally different things. Yeah. And maybe for the Hindu in India, it's just one path, one yoga, one kind of yoga, the bhakti yoga, the devotional yoga. And there are 3 other yogas. Yeah. So all of Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition is just bhakti yoga for them,
right? Right.
So I have a few notions which really always fascinated me since a long, long time. There's this, and there are certain wisdom tradition notions. I don't want to go into it. This is not about me, this interview, but where do you get the wisdom for your spiritual journey, for your journey, which makes you understand more who you are and makes you also forgive yourself? Because obviously, I don't know why we are born like this, that we have to forgive ourselves, but we all do.
Yeah, we do, don't we? Isn't it funny? It's part of the human experience, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised Catholic and in a very conservative Christian area that was mostly Baptist or Methodist, but very conservative. So being Catholic here in Mississippi was actually very odd. Then everyone else was either Baptist or Methodist. And so if you were Catholic, you were already kind of weird, which is kind of funny to me. But over the years, I've studied all the traditions, and I was that kid who I feel like I came into this world with some sort of depth and knowing that there was more to God than just, a set of rules, and that religion often presents to us. And I would always question my mom when I was really young, like all of the hard spiritual questions when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. And she never knew how to answer me because they were so deep. And so I've always had this depth to me, and this, I wanted to always seek different ways of thinking and ways of being. And so I've always been very curious about other spiritualities and other ways of life. And I think for me, my answer is really simple when it comes down to it. And my 3-year-old will tell you the same thing, because she believes what I believe. And that's that God is in my heart, and that my heart is God. And I think when it comes down to it, I think it's that simple. It's just being connected to God in that way, and then making choices that are in alignment with what my heart wants. And so that's how I try to, it gets really hard at the end of the day to sometimes listen if we're not taking that time to listen. But really the answer for me is very simple, and it's that, and I've always felt that way, is that God to me is what my heart truly desires and wants. And the other part is trusting that whatever my heart wants is going to find its way to me. So I know that's a simple, maybe too simple of an answer there, but that's really what I feel.
It's simplicity is actually for me when somebody understands, the complexity. And for me also, it's like, I would say, particularly knowing you and now Ken Stone, friend of yours, I believe that, first of all, we are free to believe whatever we want to believe. Yeah. That's the first thing. I am really not very interested in anything which comes from dogma. And the other thing is God. It's really like there is something more than we are. Yeah. But I don't have to call it a personal God.
Right.
It could be a supra-personal God, like the Hindus experience it, or it could be something, what is just emptiness or the void, like the Buddhists see it. It doesn't matter. Maybe we are enough of personalizations of that thing, because we don't need another person, because they're already full. How many billions are there? Personal gods, right? Right. But ultimately, it's really what you said. What you just said. Finding, you trust that God that your heart, what your heart wants and desires and love, your intentions, that this now connected to the higher power. Yeah. Some call it whatever they call it. Energy doesn't matter. Right. Some see it personal, some don't. Doesn't matter. But that you are basically, it finds a way back to you. That's beautifully said. Okay, Meagan, a general theme in your keynote speaking career, and you've been, as we mentioned, on stage with top level people, is forgiveness. And you got even a praise from Tutu, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Desmond Tutu. Yeah. Tutu, who was a big fan of the Dalai Lama. They were like big buddies. Yeah. And a very humble guy. I remember him so many times, seeing him on YouTube. They were laughing. They were laughing together like kids. Oh my gosh, they're awesome. Yeah. And forgiveness was all, and he praised you for that speech which you had on stage, mm-hmm. where he was also there at that event. And for me, it's really a big question: forgiveness. How do you forgive yourself? I can forgive others one time easily, because I always say, everybody makes a mistake. But if you make the same mistake twice, so let's say they insult me a second time, then I have to tell them already a story. Right. When it happens a second time, then you are basically stupid, what I say. And when you do it again, it will be very stupid. That's what I say. So I can easily forgive one time. But sometimes I have things in the past, I have to say, honestly, I cannot easily forgive, still not.
Yeah.
I forget. I know it affects me, and it affected my all my life. There was such an ignorant, aggressive behavior. I just cannot really, honestly, completely forgive. I don't know why. And then myself, of course, the last example is when you are a non-smoker, 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, and then you start smoking again. I beat myself up because I say to myself, how stupid have you been? You started smoking again. So it has many facets, right? But I'm sure you cannot reach your true self if you are not completely understanding that important part of the journey, which is self-forgiveness. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of elements to forgiveness. Is, when you think about relationships in people who, you were talking about how you do one thing and I'll forgive you, you do it again, and that's where my boundary is or whatever. But I think at the same time, the thing I ask myself often is, when it has to do with a relationship with another person, is when they do something that I didn't like, or it hurts me, or, just kind of push my buttons, am I being honest with them about my experience and giving them an opportunity to do something different? Do you have that hard conversation? Do you give the relationship a chance by being completely honest? And I think often we avoid those conversations and those chances for healing because it's easier to just walk away from going into that deeper place with someone. And I completely understand that. I think we all have that challenge. But I think a big part of self-forgiveness is allowing yourself to say the things you need to say in some of those harder conversations with other people, and also being completely, authentic. I know for me, especially after coming back to Mississippi, being authentic about who I was really, really important to me. And when I wasn't able to have the courage in some instances to do that, then I would beat myself up for not being true to myself in the way that I really wanted to be. And so self-forgiveness has been something that for me has been about making choices that aren't authentic or aren't in alignment for what I want for my life. And so when I'm out of alignment with the things I know I truly want, like maybe I want to smoke, like maybe I want to do something that may not be wonderful for my health, but it's not getting me out of alignment with what I truly want. So you have to evaluate the things that you truly want, and if you're making the choices that are in alignment with that. And I think so often we get off course because we're distracted or we're not in touch with the deeper part of who we are, that it's easy to rack up those moments where we're not happy with our own choices, but if we're out of touch, we often don't even know that we have some self-forgiveness that needs to happen. So I think forgiveness can get complex if you think too much about it. But I think when you're choosing to be authentic and vulnerable with yourself, and you're in with others, and you're in communion with God on a regular basis, I think it's a little bit easier to navigate. But it can get tricky if we stuff things and we're not honest along the way.
It's fascinating to me that you talked a lot about what you want and who are we anyway. That brings me to that conversation about who am I, because I'm basically what I want. Because really, if you deny yourself your intentions, like a child, as a child I wanted a pony, I wanted a flying carpet, you want all kinds of things. You want to become a policeman, these are all intentions. You're not getting it, maybe it doesn't matter, but in later in life, you forget about these intentions you have in there. They're kind of hidden, but they should be free, because that's who you are.
Right.
And I understand I would have to basically, if I rightly understood you, I would have to basically look to forgive me when I didn't do what I intend to do in my life, what comes from the inside, from my nature. Right. And because then that's what happens to me personally. It probably happens to many or everybody. Which is a terrible feeling when you don't do what you want. Then it's going with the shadow side, and it comes out in strange ways.
It does.
That's what I experienced.
It does. But those are often really good, helpful things when you're not being who you want to be in a moment. It's very good feedback for something that's going on internally. So.
And you have to really believe that you can have what you want. For instance, I'm now 63 at this young age, tender age, 63. I cannot want everything anymore, I believe. Right now, I can still want everything, but there will be a time, where this is going away, where you can't do anymore everything you want.
Right.
Maybe there's a purpose to it, to maybe become more meditative, I don't know, less action-oriented, all this, but life is about growth. And then growing in experiences. I believe I cannot accomplish anything beyond myself anyway. I'm just fascinated with experiences. They
me too.
They do add to me who I am. But it's a little bit like process theology, right? I mean, everything is in this universe is always going. But ultimately, I think we try too often to accomplish something about us, and we don't know even who we are, but we are much more than we think we are. Of course, we are not what we think we are, and so we can't. Like a Buddhist perspective would be actually you can't really accomplish anything beyond yourself, even though you are like a seed only. If everything in you, like Rumi said, you're not a drop in the ocean, but you're not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in a drop. So you have everything in you, like fractal, but it's still not fully the tree. It's just somewhere in between the seed and so that there's so many paradoxes in life, but they can be understood. You know what? You told me that you have to pick up your chart. So we should come to a conclusion.
Sorry. I was just going to say too, there's so much mystery. And I think that it's hard for us, we want to have a sense of control, and we don't allow the mystery to be the mystery and be okay with it. And I think that's where, it gets hard for myself and for other people to move forward. So I just, I've just really paid attention to that lately. Like there's so much that I will never know, and I need to be okay with that.
That is very well said. I would like, it's almost like Chuang Tzu said from Taoism, one of the early freaks of Taoism, but very important one, a funny one, Chuang Tzu. He said, it's like when we are born, we are surrounded by the light of an idiot. And when we are dying, it's the same thing. I know when I'm dying, I know that I don't know anything.
Exactly.
Right now, I think I know a lot, when it all ends and you call it just like a child again. Not knowing anything. And as you said, I think the whole thing is about the mystery. In Taoism, they also say mystery upon mystery. That's how the whole thing, the first verse actually opens up. It's always mystery upon mystery. And the whole, I could go on, but I should stop. And you know what? I would just thank you for the last words you had, because they were super, they really hit me, because I think it's about the magic of life. Mystery. It's about the ignorance of life, accepting the ignorance. Also, we can, if we would know everything, we would lose the magic, and then we would not live the way we can live here. It's a magic. It's maybe a real illusion. It doesn't matter. I think it's a lot of things we don't know, but it's beautiful. It's fine. I just go out hiking, or meet new people. It's just magic.
Exactly. I agree. We have the same philosophies for sure.
So thank you, Meagan, for having been on the show. It was a real pleasure and learning experience. Thank you, Meagan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
Me too, very much. And thank you, my listeners, for joining us today. Recap of the show will be in the show notes, a few points, important bullet points, and also, of course, Meagan's website, where you find everything and where you can get in contact with her. Meagan, could you say one more time the URL, the address of your website?
Yeah, it's meaganonan.com, meaganonan.com.
That's easy to remember. And so if you like this podcast, please subscribe to have you here again for our next episode. This is your host, Joseph Schinwald. Thank you and goodbye until we meet again.